unimaginable to think what those families were going through. A horrific incident like that, and not knowing, you know, went to the school not knowing whether or not your kids were safe. It's something that it's just mind-boggling to think about it.
New York Yankees superstar Derek Jeter, reflecting on the Newtown tragedy. Jeter actually called the mother of one of the teachers who died in that horrible attack. And back with me now, Dana Lash, Grover Norquist, and Marjorie Clifton. So Dana, look, here's my issue about the death penalty. And I'd say that over the last 25 years, like many people, I've thought long and hard about this and often wondered how I would feel if I lost a child in some appalling murder like Aurora or Newtown, and maybe I would feel very differently. Maybe I'd feel exactly like Tom Tease feels. But right now I'm very concerned about this, which is the DNA evidence that has been used since 1989 has exonerated in 36 different states a total of 305 people post-conviction. 18 of those were on death row. They then found 147 of those 305 people. They found the real perpetrators or chief suspects. 27 was the average age of those who were convicted and later found not to have done the crime through DNA. And they served an average of 13 years in prison. Now, when you hear those kind of statistics, I suppose the obvious question is this. Does a wrong conviction of somebody, and we don't know whether some have been executed, we have to presume, I would imagine, that some may have been before this, does that in its own not count enough for the desire to execute others?
Well, I think if we're going to have the conversation about whether or not the death penalty is a legitimate form of punishment, that's a conversation that, you know, folks can have. But as far as James Holmes and the plea deal that was rejected and the death penalty now as a potential punishment for him, I kind of go along with Grover Norquist on this. I'm a little bit hardcore, especially when it comes to child killers. I think that these individuals personally should be subjected to a mother's justice. Let the moms go out and have their way with them. That's kind of how my perspective on this. So I might not be the best person to ask that question of. But as far as James Holmes is concerned, we don't need DNA testing for him. He was kind of caught in the act. We know, I mean, for me, my perspective, my opinion on this is that the trial at this point is a formality. And we are giving him his due process as under the U.S. Constitution. That being said, I'm with Grover. I'd kill him 12 times if I could. What he did was heinous, and we need to make an example out of people like this. This Piers right here, showing these people, making an example out of them. If we're going to have a conversation about gun control, let's hold up these people as examples.
Yeah, I mean, actually, Grover, I might ask you, I thought that Mr. Tease also raised an interesting point about the media and our potential collective culpability in glamorizing these people. I mean, it is a side product of covering these stories, which are huge national stories, and get full coverage on every network. But there is a danger, of course, that there are other disturbed young people watching this who want to be infamous, who want to outdo the last one. What do you feel about that?
Well, look, there's a Second Amendment, it's important. There's a First Amendment, it's important too. The press should be free to cover these stories, but I do think it's helpful if we do so in a way that doesn't glamorize these murderers, because there are other people out there who may go, hey, that looked interesting. So there's some very real challenges there, and folks you work with in the news media industry have got to make decisions there. Look, the great news about DNA advances are that we can look back at mistakes of government. Look, and we ought to recognize government makes many mistakes. It makes mistakes all the time. We ought not to let it run our health care, and there are real challenges even in criminal justice. The good news on DNA is moving forward, it's easier to know for sure if somebody's a murderer or a rapist or the guilty person. And so our certainty on these issues, as we are with this killer in Colorado, there's no question about the guilt of some of these murderers. That makes it easier to be an advocate of the death penalty. And I'm glad that DNA has, if it's, as I understand, has properly exonerated some people who were not guilty in the past. It also means in the future, we'll know for sure when we hang somebody that we're hanging the right guy.
Right, but Grover, going back to the cost issue, if you talk about government inefficiency, and I mean, case in point of inefficiency when it's costing $11 million to execute one individual versus life in prison costing on average $200,000, how does that even make sense? And that's I think what a lot of Americans, where they end up turning, is on the fiscal issue. Because you're right, there are changes in DNA, but we have to look at history.
Okay, well, look, on the issue of fiscal responsibility, the White House went ahead with its 135th Easter egg roll today. Quite a significant expense to the American taxpayer. Meanwhile, the White House remains closed to the viewing public through the tours, which I've been quite exercised about. Marjorie, let me start with you. I mean, what do you feel about this? I mean, obviously, these kind of events here, they have some private money and so on, but when you see the president putting on this kind of big party but refusing to allow the American public to view the White House because of a sequester, people aren't really buying that, are they?
It does look a little funny, doesn't it? You know, it's a struggle because at the same time there ends up being a lot of debates about, you know, the importance of celebrating even religious holidays in our country, acknowledging our roots in that way, you know, things that you need to do in terms of visibility and improving morale. But, you know, I agree. I think it is challenging because it is this question of, are our cuts consistent? I mean, going back to the cutting the White House, that is something that's sort of an ongoing duty that doesn't necessarily, it costs $75,000 a week, doesn't necessarily pay off in terms of civic responsibilities. Now, if the Easter egg roll is really a civic responsibility, I don't know. I guess I'd leave that to the public.
Well, the biggest concern to me, actually, and this may be down to the sustained pressure from Grover and from Dana, is the president shot hoops on his basketball court today, and he only got 2 out of 22. So, finally and very quickly, Grover Norquist, are you claiming full responsibility for the president taking his eye off the ball?
I think the sequester is probably responsible for the president not doing as well on basketball as he might. But look, the president, I think, is being silly when he doesn't allow Americans to visit the White House. These are volunteer-supported efforts. We need to rein in government spending, and we need to reduce government spending by reforming government, not by pulling these stunts that make it sound like you're saving money. Boehner, the Republican leader in the House, has made it clear that everybody the president turns away from the White House is invited to America's house, the Capitol, for a tour there.
Okay, got to leave it there. Dana, Grover, and Marjorie, thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.